The first thing I noticed was the scent of my own perfume. Not the faint, day-old trace that lingers on a scarf, but the fresh, sharp bloom of it, as if it had been sprayed only moments ago. It was strange because I wasn't wearing any. I stood in the doorway of my own home, my overnight bag still slung over my shoulder, the key cold in my hand. I'd come back a day early from my conference in Portland, a little surprise for my husband, Liam. I'd imagined his face, the slow smile spreading as he realized I was home. I'd imagined a quiet evening, takeout on the couch, the familiar comfort of our shared space. But the scent of my perfume, a custom blend of jasmine and cedarwood that was uniquely mine, was the first thread to unravel everything. The second was the sound of my own laugh. It drifted from the living room, a light, airy sound that I knew as well as my own reflection. For a dizzying second, I thought perhaps I was losing my mind. Was this some auditory hallucination brought on by exhaustion? I crept forward, my sensible heels silent on the Persian runner in the hall. The house was exactly as I'd left it, a temple of serene beiges and tasteful art. My life was a carefully curated collection of calm, and I was proud of it. But a discordant note had been struck, a deep, jarring hum of wrongness that resonated in my bones. I peeked around the archway into the living room, and there I was, or a woman who was me. She sat on our cream-colored sofa, curled into the corner just as I always did, one leg tucked beneath her. She wore my favorite gray cashmere sweater, the one with the tiny, almost invisible snag on the left sleeve. Her hair, my hair, was pulled back, in the same messy bun I favored when I was relaxing at home. And she was laughing that laugh, her head tilted back, as she looked at my husband, Liam. He was standing by the fireplace, a glass of wine in his hand, and he was smiling at her, not just any smile. It was the soft, intimate smile he reserved for me, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made my heart feel like it was expanding in my chest. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed again, reaching out a hand towards him, my hand, with my wedding ring glinting on her finger. The world tilted, the serene beige walls seeming to ripple and warp. This wasn't a trick of the light, this wasn't a hallucination. This was a woman who had stolen my face, my clothes, my laugh, my husband. And he was letting her. He was participating. A cold dread, heavier and more absolute than anything I had ever known, settled deep in my stomach. I backed away, my movements stiff and robotic. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to confront, to scream until my lungs tore. But a colder, more calculating part of my brain took over. This wasn't a simple affair. An affair is a secret, hidden in shadows. This was a replacement, a performance being staged in the heart of my own life. They hadn't expected me home. My surprise had become theirs. I pulled the door closed with an infinitesimal click, the sound lost in the ambient noise of the house. I backed down the stone path, my gaze locked on the warm, inviting light, spilling from the windows of a home that was no longer mine. Who was she? And why was Liam playing along? The questions were a swarm of angry wasps in my head, but one terrifying certainty rose above the noise. I had walked into my house and met my replacement. And my husband was part of the welcome committee. The implications of that were so monstrous, so vast, that my mind refused to fully grasp them. It was a plot, a conspiracy. And I, the real me, was standing on the outside, looking in at the ghost who had taken my place. I turned and ran, my overnight bag banging against my hip, the scent of my own perfume chasing me down the dark, quiet street. I ended up in a sterile motel room on the other side of town, the kind with thin blankets and the lingering smell of disinfectant. The garish floral pattern on the bedspread felt like an insult to the quiet, curated elegance of my life, the life that was currently being lived by someone else. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress for hours, the key to my house still clutched in my hand, its metal edges digging into my palm. My mind was a kaleidoscope of fractured images. The woman's smile, the snag on the sweater, Liam's adoring gaze. It wasn't just that he was with another woman. It was the seamlessness of it, the sheer audacity. They weren't hiding, they were inhabiting. This wasn't an infidelity, it was an erasure. I started to replay the past few months, searching for the breadcrumbs that must have led here. My mind, usually so clear and organized, felt like a cluttered attic, full of dusty, forgotten boxes. But as I sat there in the buzzing silence of the motel, I began to open them one by one. The headaches. They'd started about 6 months ago. Not my usual tension headaches, but blinding, disorienting migraines that would leave me weak and nauseous for days. Liam had been so concerned. He'd found a new specialist for me, a Dr. Albright, and had diligently made sure I took the medication prescribed. Small, chalky white pills. For prevention, the doctor had said, his smile a little too smooth. Liam would bring me a glass of water every night. "Don't forget your pill, honey," he'd say, his voice a balm of caring concern. Had the pills been the cause, not the cure? Were they meant to incapacitate me, to make me confused, sick, to make me seem unstable? Then there were the accidents, the brakes on my car feeling soft, a near miss on the freeway that left me trembling for an hour. Liam had taken it to the shop himself, returning it with a proclamation that the mechanic found nothing wrong. "You've just been stressed, Alara. Your perception is probably a little off," he'd said, patting my hand. The loose railing on the basement stairs, which I'd caught just in time. He'd fixed it the next day, chiding himself for not noticing it sooner. Each event in isolation was plausible. Forgetfulness, stress, bad luck. But threaded together now, they formed a chilling tapestry. They weren't accidents, they were attempts, they were tests, they were trying to get rid of me. And when that didn't work, they moved to Plan B, replacement. My sister, Chloe. I thought of her, and a fresh wave of sickness washed over me. 2 weeks ago, she'd called me, her voice tight with what I'd thought was sisterly worry. "Alara, are you okay? Liam called me. He's worried sick about you. He said you've been forgetful, confused." I had been angry at the time, defensive. "I'm fine, Chloe. The new medication for the migraines just makes me a little foggy sometimes." "Maybe you should take some time off," she'd pressed. "Go somewhere quiet. Recharge." Was she in on it? The idea was so vile, so contrary to every memory I had of my younger sister, the girl whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose secrets I'd kept, that my brain rebelled. But her words now echoed with a sinister undertone. Was she trying to get me out of the house, to clear the stage for my understudy? The money. It always comes down to money, doesn't it? My parents had left me a substantial inheritance, tied up in a trust that I'd gain full control of on my upcoming 35th birthday. Liam and I had our own assets, of course, but my inheritance was a different level of wealth. And my will, we'd updated our wills a year ago. A sensible, responsible thing to do. Everything of mine went to Liam. If he were to die, it would go to Chloe. A neat, tidy little package. A sudden, violent death would be messy, investigated, but what if I just disappeared? Or what if I was declared mentally incompetent, unstable, a danger to myself? A woman suffering from paranoid delusions, who claims a look-alike has taken her place? Who would the police believe? The charming, worried husband and the concerned sister? Or the frantic, wild-eyed woman babbling about a doppelganger? I knew the answer. They had built the narrative already. The headaches, the fogginess, the accidents that were my fault. They weren't just trying to replace me. They were creating a backstory to discredit me if I ever tried to fight back. The woman in my house wasn't just an imposter. She was my living, breathing alibi for my own demise. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a meticulously planned, long-term campaign. My husband, the man I'd shared my bed with for a decade, and my sister, my own blood, were the architects of my destruction. The grief was a physical force, a weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But beneath the grief, a different feeling was beginning to stir. A cold, hard kernel of rage. They had underestimated me. They thought I was the delicate, serene woman who curated a perfect life. They didn't know the steel that lay beneath the surface. They had taken my life, but they had left me with one thing, the truth. And I would use it as a weapon. I would not be erased. The first 24 hours were a blur of cheap coffee and suffocating fear. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the motel's plumbing, every car that pulled into the lot sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I kept the flimsy chain on the door and wedged a chair under the knob, as if that could stop the monstrous reality I was facing. My phone, my real phone, was in my bag. A dead weight. I couldn't turn it on. They would track it. Liam was in tech. He'd know how. My whole digital life, my emails, my social media, my bank accounts, was a map that would lead them right to me. I was a digital ghost, and I had to stay that way. My first move was to create a new identity, a temporary shield. I paid cash for another night at the motel and then walked to a sprawling, anonymous big-box store. The automatic doors hissed open, and I was swallowed by a world of bright lights and consumerism that felt utterly alien. I bought a cheap burner phone and a prepaid card, activating it right there in the electronics aisle. New number, no name attached. Then I bought a change of clothes, jeans, a dark hoodie, sneakers. Nothing like my usual tailored style. I bought a baseball cap and a pair of non-prescription glasses. Looking at myself in the dressing room mirror, I was a stranger. A tired, pale woman with frightened eyes. It was a pathetic disguise, but it was a start. I needed information. I needed to see what they were doing, what they were saying. From a public library computer, my hands trembling as I typed, I logged into a throwaway email account I'd created years ago and never used. Then I navigated to my own social media page. It was still active, and it was being updated. There was a new post from that morning, a picture of 2 coffee mugs on our kitchen island, the morning light streaming through the window. My favorite handcrafted mugs. The caption read, "A slow, perfect morning with my love." It was posted by me, or the woman who was pretending to be me. The comments were a stream of cheerful replies from my friends, my colleagues, my family. "Looks blissful. Enjoy the quiet time. Miss you at the office, Alara." Each comment was a small, sharp stab. They were interacting with my ghost, and they had no idea. The world kept spinning. My life kept moving forward, all without me in it. I felt a profound sense of vertigo, of being completely untethered from my own existence. Chloe had commented, "So glad you're feeling more like yourself, sis. Love you." The hypocrisy was so blatant, so nauseating, it made my stomach turn. This was their narrative in action. Ilara is back to her old self. The fogginess is gone. She's happy. Any deviation from this, any claim I might make, would be proof of a relapse into instability. I needed to know their endgame. Were they going to keep this charade up forever? It seemed impossible. The imposter was good. From a distance, she was perfect. But she wasn't me. She wouldn't know the specific way I organized the spice rack. She wouldn't know the story behind the small chipped ceramic bird on my nightstand. She wouldn't know the private jokes I shared with my oldest friends. Sooner or later, someone would notice the cracks. Unless they didn't plan on her being around that long. The thought landed with a cold thud. What if the plan wasn't just to replace me, but to have me die? A tragic accident. A sudden, fatal return of my illness. And Liam, the grieving widower, would inherit everything. The imposter would get her payout and disappear. It was clean. It was final. And it meant my time and hers was running out. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. My story was insane. Officer, my husband and sister hired a woman who looks exactly like me to take over my life so they can kill her for my inheritance. They would look at me in my stranger's clothes with my wild eyes and my burner phone, and they would call a psychiatrist. Liam's story would be so much more compelling. His mentally fragile wife, off her medication, suffering a psychotic break. He would be the victim. I needed proof, irrefutable proof. And the only place to get that was inside my own house. I started watching the house. From a park across the street, I sat on a bench, hidden by the shade of a large oak tree, and I observed. I saw them leave in the morning in my car. The imposter was in the passenger seat, her hand on Liam's arm. They looked like any happy couple. I saw Chloe's car pull up in the afternoon. She went inside, staying for over an hour. When she came out, she was laughing with the woman who wore my face. They hugged, two sisters sharing a moment. The sight of it, the casual, affectionate betrayal, was like swallowing glass. That night, I watched the lights in my house go on, room by room. The warm glow in the living room, the softer light in the bedroom, my bedroom. I imagined them in there, in my bed, and a raw, primal rage burned through the fear. This was my home, my life, and I was going to take it back. The fear was still there, a constant, cold companion. But now it was mixed with something else, a grim, steely resolve. They had locked me out of my own life, but they had forgotten one thing. I knew the house better than anyone. I knew its secrets, its hidden corners, its weaknesses, and I would use them. My home would become my weapon. The plan began to form in the quiet desperation of the motel room, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the low hum of the mini-fridge. If I was going to expose them, I needed to hear them. I needed their conspiracy in their own words, a recording. That was the only thing that could cut through the web of lies they had so carefully woven around me. The thought of re-entering my house was terrifying. It was enemy territory now, a stage for a play in which I was the intended victim. But it was also the only place with the answers I needed. My mind sifted through the layout of the house, every nook and cranny I'd explored over the years. And then I remembered it, the attic. It was a dusty, forgotten space, mostly filled with old furniture and holiday decorations. But it had one crucial feature. Years ago, when we first bought the house, Liam had ambitions of installing a full home security system. He'd run wiring through the walls, including a coaxial cable that terminated in the attic, intended for a camera overlooking the main living area. He'd abandoned the project, deeming it too expensive, but the wiring was still there, disconnected, dormant. A forgotten nerve in the body of the house. If I could get into the attic, I could potentially access that wiring. I could connect a small camera and a microphone, feeding it down through the old air vent that looked directly over the sofa in the living room. It was a long shot, it was dangerous, but it was the only shot I had. I spent the next 2 days gathering my tools, a scavenger in my own life. I used cash for everything. A miniature spy camera, no bigger than a thumbnail, from a seedy electronics shop downtown. A sensitive microphone, a small battery-powered digital recorder. I studied online tutorials, learning how to splice the camera and mic into the old coaxial cable and power them with a portable battery pack. My hands, which were more accustomed to holding a paintbrush or a gardening trowel, became surprisingly steady as I practiced connecting the delicate wires. I was no longer just a Lara, the curator of a calm life. I was becoming someone else, someone more resourceful, more desperate. I continued my surveillance of the house, learning their new rhythm. They left for work around 8:30. They came home around 6. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, they went to the gym together. That was my window, a 2-hour gap where the house would be empty. The key was the biggest problem. I'd left in such a panic, I'd used my main key, the one on my car keychain. But then I remembered the spare, the one we'd hidden years ago for emergencies. It was tucked inside a loose brick on the back patio, a secret only Liam and I shared. Or so I thought. Would he have remembered it? Would he have removed it? It was a gamble I had to take. On Thursday evening, I put my plan into motion. Dressed in my dark, anonymous clothes, I parked my rental car several blocks away and approached my home from the rear, slipping through the familiar shadows of my neighbors' yards. The evening was cool, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and blooming night jasmine. It was a scent that used to mean peace. Now it was the backdrop to my terror. My heart hammered against my ribs as I knelt on the patio, my fingers searching for the loose brick by the garden wall. Please be there. Please be there. My fingers closed around the cold, smooth surface of the brick. I wiggled it free, and there, nestled in the dark cavity, was the key, a small metallic glint of hope. He hadn't remembered, or he'd gotten arrogant. He thought I was gone for good, either disappeared or too broken to fight back. That was his mistake. Slipping the key into the back door lock was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The sound of the deadbolt turning was like a gunshot in the silent evening. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was silent, holding its breath. The air inside was different. It carried her scent, my perfume, but on her it smelled cloying and wrong. A faint aroma of a dinner I hadn't cooked lingered in the kitchen. I moved quickly, a phantom in my own home. I grabbed the small stepladder from the pantry and headed for the hallway closet where the attic access was hidden in the ceiling. Every creak of the floorboards was a scream. Every shadow seemed to move. I was an intruder, a trespasser in the geography of my own past. I pulled down the folding attic stairs, the familiar groan of the springs echoing in the stillness. Armed with a flashlight and my small bag of electronics, I ascended into the darkness. The air in the attic was thick with the smell of dust and old wood. It was hot and suffocating. Moonlight filtered through a single grimy window at the far end, illuminating floating dust motes like tiny ghostly stars. I crawled on my hands and knees across the scratchy insulation, my flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the gloom. I found the vent, a simple metal grate directly above the living room. Then I found the cable, coiled and forgotten near the eaves. My hands were shaking, slick with sweat, but I forced them to be still. I carefully stripped the wires, and my breath held tight in my chest. I connected the camera and microphone, securing them with electrical tape. I tested the battery pack. A tiny red light on the recorder blinked to life. It was working. I carefully positioned the camera, peering through the grate to check the angle. It had a perfect, unobstructed view of the sofa and the fireplace, their favorite spot. I tucked the recorder and battery pack behind a stack of old boxes hidden in the shadows. The setup was complete. My heart was a frantic drum solo against my ribs. I needed to get out, now. But as I started to crawl back towards the attic stairs, I heard it. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Headlights slashed across the attic window. They were home, early. Panic seized me, cold and absolute. My blood ran like ice water in my veins. They were home. They were early. The 2-hour window I had counted on had snapped shut, and I was caught. My mind raced, a frantic scramble for options. I couldn't make it down the attic stairs and out the back door in time. They would hear me. They would see me. My only option was to stay put. To melt into the shadows of the attic and pray. They didn't have any reason to come up here. I scrambled away from the attic entrance, deeper into the cluttered darkness, my breath coming in ragged, silent gasps. I wedged myself behind a large, forgotten wardrobe and an old trunk filled with my childhood memorabilia. I pulled an old, dusty canvas dropcloth over me, the fabric smelling of mildew and thyme. I was a rat in the walls of my own house. Below, I heard the front door open and close. Their voices drifted up, muffled by the floorboards. Liam's familiar baritone, and her voice, the uncanny echo of my own. "I can't believe the gym was closed for cleaning," she said. Her tone was light, conversational, but to me, it sounded like a death knell. "Their website said they'd be open," Liam replied, his voice laced with annoyance. "Oh well, more time to relax, I guess. I'll open that bottle of Pinot you like." My Pinot, the one I saved for special occasions. I heard the clink of glasses, the squeak of the corkscrew. They were settling in for the night, directly below me, directly in view of my hidden camera. A strange, chilling duality washed over me. I was terrified, trapped, but I was also exactly where I needed to be. My trap for them had become my own cage, but the bait was still on the hook. I just had to survive long enough to reel it in. Time stretched and warped in the suffocating heat of the attic. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound from below was magnified, a fresh wave of terror. The murmur of their conversation, the sound of the television, the clink of a fork against a plate. They were eating dinner, living my life. I remained perfectly still, my muscles screaming in protest. A spider crawled over my hand, and I had to fight every instinct to flinch, to scream. I held my breath until it passed, a tiny horror in the midst of a monumental one. Through a small gap in the floorboards, I could see a sliver of the living room light. It was a tantalizing, terrifying glimpse into the world that had been stolen from me. Hours passed, my legs cramped, my throat was parched, the dust in the air made my nose itch, and I had to press my fingers against my nostrils to stifle a sneeze. Sometime after 10, another sound reached me. The doorbell. My body went rigid. Who could be visiting this late? I heard Liam's footsteps, the door opening, and then a third voice, Chloe, my sister. "Hey, you two," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Just thought I'd drop off those papers you needed for the bank." My blood froze. She was here, all three of them together. The architect, the muscle, and the understudy, all gathered in one room. I shifted my position ever so slightly, a millimeter at a time, until I could peer through the vent. The view was sickeningly clear. Liam, Chloe, and the imposter, who I was beginning to think of as Anna, the name of a villain from a book I'd read as a child, were gathered in the living room. Anna was on the sofa. Chloe sat in my favorite armchair, and Liam was pouring Chloe a glass of wine. They looked like a happy family. "Thanks for dropping these off," Liam said, handing Chloe a folder. "It's the last of the paperwork for the new power of attorney. Once it's filed, we're all set." Power of attorney. They were taking legal control of my assets, my life, using my faked signature, my faked presence. They were building their cage of legitimacy bar by bar. "How are you feeling, Alara?" Chloe asked, turning to Anna with that same concerned expression she'd used on me over the phone. It was a performance, and she was playing her part beautifully. "Much better," Anna replied, her voice a perfect mimicry of my own. "I think getting off that old medication was the best thing for me. I feel so much clearer." "You seem better," Chloe said, reaching out to pat her hand. "We were so worried." The scene was so surreal, so grotesquely domestic, that I felt a wave of nausea. I was watching my own murder being planned, and they were discussing it like they were arranging a dinner party. The rage that had been a small, hard kernel inside me began to burn hot and bright. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness, and I was recording everything. I remained entombed in the suffocating darkness, a silent, listening ghost. The drop cloth over me was scratchy, and every tiny shift of my body sounded like an avalanche in my own ears. Below, the conversation continued. A symphony of my destruction played out in casual domestic tones. They were so confident, so arrogantly secure in my absence, in my erasure. That arrogance would be their undoing. "So the final paperwork is filed," Liam said, his voice low and conspiratorial now that the pretense of a casual visit was over. He sat down on the sofa next to Anna, his arm draping casually around her shoulders. "The doctors have all documented her instability. The narrative is set. And the power of attorney gives you full control," Chloe added, her voice sharp with a practical edge. I recognized all too well. She had always been the pragmatic one, the one who focused on the bottom line. "So what's the next step? We can't keep this," she gestured vaguely at Anna, "going on forever. Someone from her book club is going to ask a question Anna can't answer. It's a risk." Anna shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, I heard a flicker of something other than mimicry in her voice, a hint of nervousness. "I've been studying," she said defensively. "I've read all her journals, I've watched the videos." Studying isn't living, Anna. Liam cut her off, his tone hardening slightly. Chloe's right. We need to move to the final phase. The final phase. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy with unspoken meaning. I pressed my eye closer to the grate, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had to see their faces. Liam's expression was cold, calculating. The warm, loving man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by this chilling stranger. Chloe was watching him, her face a mask of shrewd anticipation. "The lake house," Liam said. "We'll go up next weekend. A romantic getaway. A chance for Ilara to finally relax." The lake house, my parents' old place, my sanctuary, the place I went to feel close to them. He was going to defile that memory too. "A boating accident," he continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She gets a little too much sun, drinks a little too much wine. She falls overboard. It's tragic, a terrible accident. But her history of migraines, of dizziness, it will all make sense." My blood ran cold. He was talking about murdering this woman, this stranger who wore my face, and making it look like an accident. And he was saying it so calmly, as if he were planning a weekend barbecue. Chloe nodded slowly, a flicker of something, greed, satisfaction in her eyes. "And the life insurance policy? It's recent enough to be flagged." "No," Liam said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "We took it out over a year ago when we did the wills, standard procedure. And with my power of attorney, I'll have no problem managing the estate. Everything will be clean." Anna, the imposter, was pale. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You get your money and you disappear," Liam said, his voice sharp, impatient. "We have your new passport, your new identity. You fly to Argentina, you start a new life. That was the deal." "But they'll be looking for her body," Anna stammered. "A boating accident." "They'll search," Liam said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "But the lake is deep. They won't find a thing. After a few weeks, the search will be called off. Ilara will be presumed dead, lost. It's sadder that way, more tragic, and much, much cleaner for us. No body, no autopsy." A profound, soul-crushing horror washed over me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about my complete and utter annihilation. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to erase every physical trace that I had ever existed. I would become a ghost story, a local tragedy. The poor, unstable woman who vanished from a boat. My sister, my own sister, was complicit in this. She sat there, sipping my wine in my house, calmly planning to have me declared dead so she and my husband could steal my inheritance. The grief I felt was so immense, so total, that it almost choked me. The little girl whose hair I used to braid, who I'd protected from bullies, was now one of them. "It's perfect," Chloe breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that turned my stomach. "It's foolproof." Liam raised his glass. "To the final phase," he said. Chloe and Anna raised their glasses in unison. "To the final phase," they echoed. I watched them drink, a toast to my death. I was trapped. In the hot, dusty darkness, tears silently streaming down my face, my body trembling with a mixture of terror and a white-hot, righteous fury. They thought they were toasting their victory, but they were wrong. Every word, every cold, calculated syllable was being captured. Every moment of their monstrous betrayal was being etched into the memory of my hidden recorder. They were toasting their own damnation, and I was the one who was going to serve it to them. I just had to survive the night. I had to get out of this attic, out of this house, and bring their world crashing down around them. The wait was an eternity. The longest night of my life was spent in that attic. After Chloe left, Liam and Anna cleaned up the glasses and went to bed. I heard the floorboards creak above my bedroom, their muffled movements a constant, agonizing reminder of their betrayal. I heard the water run in my bathroom. I heard the soft click of the lamp on my nightstand being turned off. And then silence. A profound, heavy silence that was more terrifying than the conversation had been. It was the silence of their absolute certainty. The silence of a plan set in motion. I didn't dare move for hours. I stayed wedged in my hiding spot, my body a knot of cramped muscles and raw nerves. The initial storm of rage and grief subsided, leaving behind a cold, clear purpose. I had the evidence. Now I had to deliver it. My survival depended on my escape. Sometime before dawn, when the darkness outside had softened to a deep, bruised purple, I decided it was time. The house was in its deepest sleep. I listened, straining my ears for any sound, any sign of movement. Nothing, just the gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen below. Moving with a stealth I never knew I possessed, I crawled out from behind the wardrobe. Every millimeter of movement was deliberate, calculated. I avoided the loose floorboards I knew were near the center of the attic, keeping to the stronger beams along the edges. I retrieved the recorder and the battery pack, my most precious possessions, and tucked them securely into the inner pocket of my hoodie. I didn't dare try to retrieve the camera itself. It was too risky. The recording was what mattered. I crept towards the attic stairs, my heart in my throat. I lowered the folding ladder with agonizing slowness, controlling its descent so the springs made only the faintest groan. I paused after every movement, listening. Silence. I placed my feet on the rungs, testing each one before putting my full weight on it. Down into the hallway closet, I gently pushed the ladder back up into the ceiling, closing the panel with a soft click. I was out of the attic, but I was still deep inside enemy territory. I stood in the darkness of the closet for a full minute, letting my eyes adjust, my ears strain. The air was cool on my sweat-drenched skin. I could hear the slow, steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the entryway. A sound that had always comforted me. Now it sounded like a bomb, counting down the seconds until my discovery. I eased the closet door open and slipped into the hallway. The house was filled with the strange, deep shadows of pre-dawn. Moonlight cast long, distorted shapes across the floor. I moved on silent feet, a ghost in my own home, past the closed door of my own bedroom. The thought that they were in there, sleeping in my bed, sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. I didn't let myself dwell on it. I had one goal, the back door. I reached the kitchen. The faint glow of the microwave clock read 4:32 a.m. I had to get out before the sun rose, before the neighborhood started to stir. My hand was on the deadbolt of the back door when I heard it. A floorboard creaked upstairs. I froze, my entire body rigid. Had they heard me? Was one of them getting up for a glass of water? I flattened myself against the wall, hiding in the deep shadow between the pantry and the refrigerator. I held my breath, my ears straining. More creaks, footsteps. Someone was walking down the stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure it was audible. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs and paused. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable scream, the shout, the confrontation. This was it. They had me. Then the footsteps continued, moving not towards the kitchen, but towards the living room. I risked a glance around the edge of the doorway. It was Anna. She was standing in the middle of the living room, illuminated by the pale moonlight filtering through the large picture window. She wasn't looking for me. She was just standing there. She was wrapped in my silk robe, her arms crossed over her chest. Her posture wasn't confident or triumphant. She looked small, lost. She walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photograph. It was a picture of me and Liam, taken on our honeymoon in Italy. We were young, happy, and impossibly in love. She stared at it for a long, silent moment. Then, with a quiet, almost imperceptible shake of her head, she put it back down. She ran a hand over the smooth, cool marble of the mantel, her fingers tracing the patterns. She was touching my life, my memories, and in her lonely pre-dawn wandering, I saw not a monster, but a pawn. A frightened, trapped woman who had made a terrible deal and was now living inside the gilded cage they had built for her. The sight didn't soften my resolve, but it clarified it. My fight wasn't just with her. She was a symptom. The disease was Liam and Chloe. Anna turned and walked back towards the stairs, oblivious to my presence, just feet away in the kitchen. She disappeared back into the darkness upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close softly before I allowed myself to breathe again. The encounter had shaken me, but it had also given me the final push I needed. I turned the deadbolt with infinite care, the click seeming to echo in the Vada's cavernous silence. I slipped out the back door, closing it gently behind me. I didn't look back. I walked, then jogged, then ran through the quiet, sleeping streets, the precious recording pressed against my chest. The cool morning air felt clean, pure. It was the air of freedom. I had the truth, and now it was time to let it see the light of day. The police station was a fortress of beige brick and impersonal bureaucracy. It was just after 6 a.m., and the building was quiet, inhabited only by a few tired-looking officers finishing their night shift. I walked in, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm. I clutched the digital recorder in my pocket like a holy relic. This was the moment of truth. Would they believe me? Or would they see a disheveled, paranoid woman and make the call I dreaded? I approached the front desk, where a portly, balding sergeant sat hunched over a crossword puzzle. He looked up at me over his glasses, his expression a mixture of boredom and mild annoyance. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff. "I need to report a crime," I said, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. "A conspiracy to commit murder." His eyebrows shot up. He put his pen down and leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Okay, your name?" "Elara Vance," I said. He typed it into his computer. A frown creased his forehead. "Elara Vance, we have a missing persons advisory out for you. Your husband filed it yesterday morning. Said you'd been unstable, disappeared from a wellness retreat." The trap was already sprung. Liam's narrative was already the official record. They had worked so fast. "My husband is the one trying to have me murdered," I said, my voice gaining a desperate edge. "He and my sister, they've replaced me with a look-alike. They're planning to stage her death to collect my inheritance." The sergeant stared at me, his expression shifting from interest to a weary skepticism I knew all too well. It was the look people give to the unhinged. "Ma'am," he started, his voice gentle, patronizing. "No," I said, cutting him off. "I refuse to be dismissed. I have proof." I pulled the small digital recorder from my pocket and placed it on the high counter between us. "I have a recording of my husband, my sister, and the woman they hired. They discuss the entire plan, the power of attorney, the fake accident, everything. You have to listen to it." He looked from my face to the recorder, then back again. I could see the conflict in his eyes. This wasn't the usual rambling of a distressed person. This was specific, and I had a piece of evidence. He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Okay, let's go to an interview room. Detective Harding is just starting his shift. He handles sensitive cases." He led me down a sterile hallway to a small windowless room with a metal table and 3 chairs. The air was stale. He left me there, and for 10 minutes I sat in agonizing silence, my fear and hope warring within me. The door opened and Detective Harding walked in. He was a tall, lean man in his late 40s, with tired eyes that seemed to have seen every form of human misery. He carried a coffee mug and a file folder, which he placed on the table. He didn't sit down right away. He just stood there, studying me. "I'm Detective Harding," he said, his voice quiet, even. "Sergeant Miller says you have a story to tell me." "I have more than a story," I said, pushing the recorder across the table towards him. "I have a recording." He looked at the recorder, then at me. "Ms. Vance, your husband, Liam, is a respected man in this community. He's been beside himself with worry. He's provided documentation from your doctors about your recent mental health struggles." "The doctors he found for me," I retorted. "The struggles caused by the medication he gave me. It's all part of the plan. To discredit me. Please, just listen." I watched his face, searching for any sign of belief. His expression was unreadable, a professional mask. He finally sat down, pulling the recorder closer. He picked up a set of headphones from his bag and plugged them in. "Let's hear what you've got," he said, his tone non-committal. He placed the headphones over his ears and pressed play. I watched him. It was the most intense moment of my life. For the first few minutes, as the recording played the muffled sounds of my crawling through the attic, his expression remained neutral. He was listening, but he wasn't convinced. Then the voices started. "Liam, Chloe, Anna." The casual discussion of my instability. Harding's posture didn't change, but I saw a flicker in his eyes, a shift from passive listening to active focus. As the conversation turned to the power of attorney, I saw his hand, the one holding the coffee mug, tighten slightly. He was hearing the mechanics of the crime, the cold, logistical details. And then came the part about the lake house, the boating accident, the plan to make my body disappear. I saw Detective Harding's jaw clench. His eyes, which had been tired and weary, were now sharp, focused, and filled with a cold, professional anger. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the wall, but I knew he was seeing the scene I had witnessed. He was hearing the toast. To the final phase. He listened to the very end, to the silence after Chloe left. He took off the headphones and placed them on the table. The silence in the room was absolute. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see skepticism. I saw belief. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice low and serious, "I need you to tell me everything from the very beginning." The dam of my composure broke. Relief, so profound and overwhelming, it felt like a physical blow, washed over me. I started to talk, and as the story poured out of me, the headaches, the accidents, the phone call from Chloe, the moment I walked into my own home, and saw her, I began to cry. Not tears of fear or grief, but tears of catharsis. I was no longer alone in my nightmare. Someone else knew the truth, and he was going to help me. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of focused activity. Detective Harding didn't just believe me, he became my champion. He brought in another detective, a woman named Chen, whose sharp, intelligent eyes missed nothing. They sat with me in that small interview room, and I recounted my story again, this time with a growing sense of empowerment. They recorded my official statement, their questions precise and methodical. They treated me not as a hysterical woman, but as a primary witness to a meticulously planned crime. While I spoke, Harding was already setting the wheels of justice in motion. He made calls, his voice low and authoritative. He obtained a warrant based on my testimony and the recording, my illegal recording, which he assured me would be admissible under the circumstances as evidence of a violent felony in progress. The plan they formulated was simple and swift. They wouldn't tip their hand. They would let Liam and Chloe believe their plan was proceeding flawlessly. The romantic getaway to the lake house was scheduled for the next day, a Saturday. The local sheriff's department near the lake would be put on alert, but Harding wanted to apprehend them here, in my house, the scene of their conspiracy. The takedown was scheduled for that evening. Harding's team would move in, and they would use the recording as the ultimate reveal. We want to see their faces when they hear their own voices plotting murder, Harding had said, a grim set to his jaw. We give them no room to create another lie. I was moved to a protected hotel, a secure location with 2 uniformed officers posted outside my door. For the first time in days, I felt a semblance of safety. I was able to take a hot shower, to eat a real meal, but I couldn't rest. I was a spectator now, waiting for the final act of a play I had inadvertently written. My role was over, and all I could do was wait for the curtain to fall. That evening, I sat with Detective Chen in an unmarked car parked a block away from my house. I had insisted on being there. I needed to see it. I needed the closure of witnessing their world collapse as mine had. Chen was quiet, her presence a calming force. "You're brave," she said, her eyes on the house. "You know that, right? Most people would have crumbled." "I didn't have a choice," I whispered, my gaze fixed on the warm lights of my living room window. "They didn't give me one." Through a pair of binoculars, I could see them, Liam and Anna. They were in the living room, packing a weekend bag. They were laughing. Liam kissed her, a casual, familiar gesture that still sent a shard of ice through my heart. They were preparing for their murder trip. At 8:15 p.m., Harding's voice crackled over Chen's radio. "All teams in position. We're going in." I watched as 2 dark vans, which had been parked innocuously on the street, moved silently into position. Officers in tactical gear emerged, moving with a fluid, silent grace surrounding the house. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The front door was breached with a single heavy thud. The sound echoed down the quiet suburban street. I saw the lights inside the house flicker as bodies moved quickly past the windows. And then, the sound. Harding's team had brought a powerful portable speaker, and from it, echoing through the night, came the sound of their own voices. My recording, I couldn't hear the words clearly from this distance, but I could imagine the effect. I imagined Liam and Anna, frozen in the act of packing for their getaway, suddenly hearing their own cold, cruel words played back to them. A boating accident. The lake is deep. They won't find a thing. I imagined the blood draining from their faces, the dawning, sickening realization that their perfect, foolproof plan had been discovered, that their victim was not gone, but had been listening. The house was silent for a moment, and then the chaos erupted. I saw silhouettes struggling against the windows, shouting. Then the front door opened. Liam was brought out first, his hands cuffed behind his back. His face, which I had loved for a decade, was a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. He scanned the street, his eyes wild. He was looking for me. He knew I had done this. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the distance. In that moment, I saw no remorse, no regret, only hatred, the pure black hatred of a predator whose prey had fought back and won. Then they brought Anna out. She was weeping, her body shaking uncontrollably. She looked like a lost child, a doll whose strings had been cut. She wasn't a monster. She was just a woman who had made a deal with them. And finally, another squad car pulled up. They had gone to Chloe's apartment at the same time. They brought her out, her face pale and slack with shock. She looked small and pathetic in her expensive yoga pants and designer hoodie. She saw Liam in the other car, and her face crumpled. Their alliance, forged in greed and betrayal, had dissolved in the harsh glare of police lights. I watched as they were put into separate cars and driven away. The lights of my house, which had been a beacon of false warmth, were now stark and clinical, filled with uniformed officers conducting their investigation. Detective Chen turned to me. "It's over," she said softly. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. It was over. The immediate threat was gone. But as I stared at the house, at the scene of my life's implosion, I knew that the real aftermath was just beginning. I had survived. I had won. But the scars of their betrayal would be a part of me forever. The victory felt hollow, somber. I had taken my life back, but I could never return to the woman I was before I walked through that door and met myself. The weeks that followed the arrests were a surreal landscape of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and the slow, arduous process of reclaiming a life. My story, once a secret nightmare, became a public spectacle. "The doppelganger plot," one tabloid headline screamed. "Wife's uncanny revenge," read another. I became a reluctant local celebrity, my face staring out from news websites and television screens. I gave one and only one detailed statement to the press, with Detective Harding by my side. I told the truth, simply and factually. I owed it to myself and to the reality they had tried so hard to obliterate. The evidence against them was overwhelming. My recording was the centerpiece, a chilling, undeniable account of their conspiracy. But the police investigation uncovered more. They found the burner phones Liam had used to communicate with Anna. They found the fraudulent power of attorney documents. They found financial records showing a large sum of money transferred to an account belonging to Anna's real name, which they traced through her family in a neighboring state. She was a struggling actress with a gambling problem, a desperate woman who had answered a cryptic online ad seeking a performance artist for a long-term immersive role. She confessed everything, agreeing to testify against Liam and Chloe in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her story painted a grim picture of manipulation and fear. Liam had been charming at first, but had become controlling and menacing as the plan progressed. She was as much his prisoner as I would have been. Liam and Chloe, faced with a mountain of evidence, turned on each other. Their bond, which I had once seen as a close, familial connection, revealed itself to be nothing more than a partnership of convenience and greed. Liam's lawyers tried to paint him as a man manipulated by a sociopathic sister-in-law. Chloe's defense argued she was coerced by her domineering, charismatic brother-in-law. Their lies were transparent, pathetic attempts to escape the consequences of their shared monstrosity. I had to face them in court. Walking into that courtroom was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I saw Liam at the defendant's table. He looked smaller, diminished in his ill-fitting suit. He wouldn't look at me. His arrogance had been replaced by a sullen, bitter resentment. And I saw Chloe. When our eyes met, I saw a flicker of the sister I once knew, a flash of shame and despair, before it was swallowed by a cold, hard defiance. That flicker was, in a way, more painful than Liam's outright hatred. It was a reminder of what had been lost, of the love she had so thoroughly betrayed. My testimony was calm and clear. I told the story from the first headache to the final chilling toast in my living room. When the prosecutor played a section of the recording for the jury, a hush fell over the courtroom. Hearing their voices again in that sterile public space was jarring. Hearing their casual discussion of my death, their laughter sent a fresh wave of cold through me. But this time I wasn't hiding in an attic. I was sitting in the witness stand, bathed in light, telling my truth. The jury's deliberation was short. Liam was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and a host of other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. Chloe, for her role, received a sentence of 25 years. Anna, for her cooperation, was given 5. The legal battle was over, but the emotional one was just beginning. I could never go back to my house. It was no longer a home, it was a crime scene, tainted by the ghosts of what had happened there. I hired a company to pack up my life, to sort the real from the performance. They sent me boxes of my belongings, and I went through them one by one. The cashmere sweater with the snag, the chipped ceramic bird, the photograph from our honeymoon. Each object was a memory, now poisoned. I sold the house and everything in it. I needed to sever the final tie, to let the past burn. I moved to a small, quiet town by the sea, a place where no one knew my name or my story. I rented a small cottage with a garden, and I started to rebuild. There are days when the fear returns, a phantom limb aching, with a pain that is no longer there. I have trouble with trust. A kind gesture from a stranger, a warm smile, can sometimes trigger a flash of suspicion, a momentary flicker of the paranoia they tried to instill in me. I see a therapist. We talk about grief, not just for the life I lost, but for the people I thought I knew. The husband I loved, the sister I adored. I am grieving ghosts, mourning people who in reality never truly existed. But there are good days too, days when I walk on the beach and feel the salt spray on my face, and I am grateful for the simple, profound fact of my own survival. I plant new flowers in my garden. I read books. I have started to paint again, filling canvases not with serene, curated landscapes, but with bold, chaotic splashes of color. My anger, my fear, my resilience. I am not the woman I was. That Alara, the one who curated a perfect, calm life, is gone. She died in that attic, listening to a toast to her own death. The woman who emerged is different. She is warier, quieter, but she is also stronger. She knows the depths of human darkness because she has lived in its shadow, but she also knows the strength of her own spirit. They tried to erase me. They tried to turn me into a ghost, a tragic story, but I refused. I fought back. I survived. And in surviving, I found a new kind of peace. Not the serene, perfect peace of my old life, but a harder-won peace, a quiet, resilient strength. The peace of knowing that I walked through the fire, and I came out the other side whole